Hello students, today I am going to discuss a poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson. This is a very famous lyric by Tennyson titled Break, Break, Break. We all know Alfred Lord Tennyson was a Victorian poet. By Victorian poet we understand the poets and the writers who wrote during the period of Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria ruled England for a very long period from 1838 to 1901, and during her period Britain saw a lot of expansion in its empire, lots of development in science, in industry. There were lots of happenings in political field, in economic activities, in social spheres of life. So this was an age of great prosperity, Victorian age. After the period of Queen Elizabeth, English literature saw another great period during Queen Victoria. And as we know, 16th century, that was the year or the period of Queen Elizabeth, and that was the time of Shakespeare and his contemporaries and the predecessors of Shakespeare and his successors, was the original romantic period of English literature. And that romanticism of English literature was lost in the 17th century metaphysical thoughts and religious writings, and the conceits of those metaphysical writers which were difficult to understand. The poetry in the 17th century had become a bit more philosophical and religious, and was not too close to the lives of the people. And in reaction to that poetry of the 17th century, we had the 18th century poetry of reason, of satire, of social criticism, where we had poets discussing in detail about the lives of people and society and their drawbacks and follies. And in this development in the field of poetry, imagination was lost, individualism was lost, personal world of the people, man and woman, their own inner world, their imagination, their sorrows, their sufferings, all were lost. So in reaction to all that, we had the romantic revival in the early 19th century, and we have discussed in detail some aspects of romanticism, the precursors of romantic poetry, and the romantic revival poets of two generations like Wordsworth, Coleridge, Scott, Southey of the first generation, and Byron, Shelley, and Keats of the second generation. They brought poetry to a world of exquisite beauty and to medieval supernaturalism and fantasy, like in the poems by Keats and Coleridge. And Wordsworth brought the simple man and simple language and love of nature and a transcendental aspect of human existence, where there is a connection, an inner bond created by that universal soul that joins humankind with the natural world. That was the philosophy of Wordsworth, in which he saw that the whole world was having an inner connection through that universal soul that was there in the world of nature and in the world of human beings. So he found peace and solace when he came in contact to nature. After that romantic revival of poetry, we come to the world of Victorian poetry. Science was developing and it was challenging the ideals long held sacred by the people, by the religious people, by the believers, that the God created this world and the Almighty was a just ruler who observed everything in the world and paid accordingly to the people their prizes and their punishments. In response to the scientific development and the industrial revolution, a type of skepticism started or entered into the mind of the people. They started doubting the theories of benevolent God looking after them. So a conflict between science and religion is a remarkable aspect of the Victorian poetry that is not to be found in the Romantic Revival period. This is one distinguishing aspect of the Victorian poetry, and a type of musicality that was lost in some aspects of the poem of the Romantic Revival's poet. In their quest for simple diction, we find that the words are used to their best musicality by poets like Tennyson. Tennyson's words are filled with sonorous musicality, and there is a masterful rhythm displayed in most of his poems. He was born in 1809 and died in 1892, and after the death of William Wordsworth, Tennyson became the poet laureate in 1850 and remained as such till his death in 1892. So he was immensely popular for his works. His famous lyrics are Tears, Idle Tears, The Charge of the Light Brigade, Crossing the Bar, and his longer poems are In Memoriam, Maud, Idylls of the King, etc. We find a lot of figures of speech like assonance, alliteration, onomatopoeia, etc. used in his poems masterfully. And in this poem, Break, 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 the poet is discussing his personal loss, his personal sorrow. It is his loss of one of his best friends, Arthur Hallam, who died at a very young age and left Alfred Tennyson bewildered because of his sudden, unexpected, shocking death. This is an elegy In this poem, that is divided into 4 stanzas, he expresses his sense of loss very powerfully. Let us read the poem and see and feel how he feels that sorrow. Break, break, break on the cold grey stones, O sea, and I would that my tongues could utter the thoughts that arise in me. In the first stanza, the poet presents the picture of the sea and the seashore, where the poet is watching the waves of the sea coming and striking against the rocks at the shore, and he asks the sea to come and break its waves and come and strike against the stones which are cold and which are grey. This repetition of the word break, 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 not only introduces a sense of broken spirit, but also a sense of shattered self of the poet, of the personality of the poet. And the cold grey stones also suggests the condition of his heart, that he is feeling full of sorrow. And it reminds us of the lines from Hamlet when the hero says, "Blow, blow, thou winter wind," where the poet asks the winter wind to blow and not stop, and here the poet asks the sea to allow its waves to come and strike again and again at the rocky shores, because the poet is finding it hard to express what he wants to express. He thinks if he had that power in his tongues to express what he wanted to express, he is full of thoughts in his mind and in his heart, but he is unable to give expression to that. He is speechless. He is so shocked at that sorrow. And in the next stanza, he presents the picture of a fisherman's boy, the image of a fisherman's boy, and says, "Oh, well for the fisherman's boy that he shouts with his sister at play. Oh, well for the sailor lad that he sings in his boat on the bay." Here again we find 2 pictures of a fisherman's boy who is playing with his sister, and a sailor, a young sailor who is singing in his boat. And these 2 pictures are starkly in contrast with the condition of the poet, because the poet is speechless and finding it difficult to express what he wants to express. But the fisherman's boy is able to speak out. He is shouting, he is crying, he is playing with his sister, and he is not speechless. His emotions are not blocked, not suppressed, not shocked. And again, the sailor lad is singing full of joy, and he is not like the poet. So these are the pictures which are brought in contrast to the speechless state of the poet's self. And again in the 3rd stanza, "And the stately ships go on to their heaven under the hill, but oh for the touch of a vanished hand and the sound of a voice that is still." And the world is going on as it is, nothing special for the world. There has been no change. The stately ships go on. This image of the ships moving on the surface of the sea suggests that the natural day-to-day activities of the world is going as usual. There is no change in the world. all of them are going to their destinations far away without any obstruction. But for the poet, things are not the same. He has lost the touch of a vanished hand, presents us uh, a combination of visual and tactile imagery. The touch of that hand which is not to be seen now, which has vanished. The mind is full of that touch, that friendliness, that memory that the poet is having in his mind, and the sound of a voice that is still. In this line, we find a bit of contradiction in the plain reading, that it is a voice, but that voice is still. That is a sound, but that sound is noiseless. It is an expression that the ringing voice of that friend who has lost his life, who is no more in the world, is there in the mind, in the hearts of the poet. The poet is full of the memory of that sound. The voice of his friend is still alive in his mind, but it is not to be relived. It is not to be re-experienced. It is not to be found again in the true sense of the physical world. And so it is a beautiful expression that the sound of a voice that is still. Break, break, break at the foot of thy crags, O sea, but the tender grace of a day that is dead will never come back to me. So the poet concludes in the last stanza by asking the sea to go on as it goes on regularly, comes and strikes against the rocks at the shore. There is no change in the movement of the sea waves as it is going on, the nature is going on as it goes, but a great change has taken place in the life of the poet, because something very important has been lost, the tender grace of a day that is dead. The day that was lived with lot of love and happiness is dead now. The day that is dead, it is again a very powerful expression of the past time that cannot be regained. That is a loss that the poet is trying to recapture, but he is expressing that it is not possible to capture it back. There is alliteration in it also. So we find that the rhyme scheme of the poem, the second and fourth lines of all the stanzas rhyme together. The diction has been used very beautifully. The sad state of the mind of the poet has been so exquisitely expressed through the contrasting imageries of the fisherman's boy, of the singing sailor lad, of the stately ships going on as usual, of the sea waves coming and striking as it used to do, or it uses to do all the times as it's natural for it. But in contrast to all that, a great loss has been inflicted upon the poet, and he is unable to explain why this has come to him. So we find this is a beautiful experience of a beautiful expression of a poet's personal loss. And we know that Tennyson wrote another poem that is a very long poem in 131 parts. In that big book there are 131 chapters, that is In Memoriam, that was also written at the loss of Arthur Hallam, and that is considered his masterpiece. Thank you.